I just don't expect it to happen. I think he's just going to be like a field stretching option, and I don't think he's going to get a high target volume.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football Freaks. I'm Jason, he's Vaz, and today we're going to break down some of the news that's been taking place during training camp so far. Some of these issues are very significant. Some of these you should probably ignore. We're going to delve into those. But before we do, I want to quickly give you one more mention that we are going to be starting a Best Ball League, and you can absolutely join us for free. And all you got to do is leave comments on each of our videos to qualify yourself. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. And all the other details, I'm going to leave those in the descriptions below so I don't bore you too much with this information. But please do join us. We want to play with you in a fantasy football league as well. So take a look at the details in the description below. All right, Vaz, let's get into some of the news that's been going on so far in training camp. I want to first talk about Ricky Pearsall, the rookie wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, who is starting off camp on the PUP list. We don't know exactly how long he's going to be out or how much work he's going to get, but I feel like this could be significant because he's a rookie. If he was a veteran, it'd be different. And he's also got two veteran wide receivers ahead of them. One in Brandon Ayuk with a contract dispute that has not been resolved yet, but he is still in training camp. So, I think this was an opportunity for Pearsall to be in camp, learn the offense, make an impression, that kind of stuff. But the fact that he's not healthy right now, do you think this lowers his stock at all going into the season for either or both redraft and dynasty?
Well, for me, his stock was already very low for redraft. The reason being that offense is loaded with talent, and there's so many targets to go around with, Deebo Samuel and with Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, and the offense still runs through CMC, right? And I don't think Brock Purdy's really capable of throwing for a ton of yardage. So I think for just this season, his stock was already extremely low. He's probably going to go undrafted in some leagues, I'd imagine. And then, yeah, with news of this starting camp on the pup, that just, compounds the issue. So I think for Dynasty, his stock doesn't change at all because I think it was always a long-term play. But I think, yeah, definitely for this season, we probably can't expect much from him.
Let's say he misses a few weeks early on, doesn't get much action when he finally does play. And let's say, Ayuk is going throughout the season and stuff. Could he be a target maybe mid-season, like after week 7 or 8, that he hasn't done much, but a guy to maybe see if he can get on the cheap from an owner of his that might be getting impatient?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, if he starts slow, like if it's week 8, week 10, and he hasn't done much, it's definitely a guy you want to target for Dynasty. The reason being, listen, he's probably third on the depth chart at wide receiver. Maybe he's going to start at fourth on the depth chart at wide receiver. But listen, he was a first round draft pick, so they have high expectations for this guy. And I think that going into next season, one of Ayuk or Deebo will not be on the team anymore. So I think it's very, very likely that he's the number 2 option in the passing game next season, right? So if you have to understand that it's a work in progress with him, you got to be patient. But yeah, if you, like you said, if there's an owner that wants immediate production that's not quite as patient as you are, I think it's a great opportunity to buy halfway through the season if he's not putting up the production, which I expect he won't be.
Okay. Let's take a look at some hype that is building around A.J. Dillon in his camp or his team's camp. They're saying that he's in great shape and that he's going to be looking great going into this season. How much of this hype are you buying? Does it move the needle in terms of his value at all for you going into the season for either formats?
It doesn't, because I think first of all, it's great that he's in great shape, but his what's always been intriguing about him is his enormous size, right? He's like a 250-pound guy that can run really fast, right? But we haven't seen his ability. Like he hasn't looked like a premier back. He hasn't looked like a talented player in his like 3 seasons in the NFL or 4 seasons in the NFL. So he's clearly the handcuff, I guess, the running back too. They brought him back because he couldn't get a better option in free agency, a better deal in free agency. So they brought him back to be the probably the running back two on that depth chart. But I think, they paid Josh Jacobs a lot of money. I think that's his backfield. I think, AJ Dillon could come in and spell him from time to time. Hopefully not steal some goal line touches, but I think it's possible he does because of his size. But if you're a Jacobs owner, you're hoping that's not the case. But no, I think this is Jacobs' backfield 100%. He's going to be a target of mine in redraft leagues because I follow the money in fantasy football, and they pay Jacobs a boatload of money, so they want to give him the ball. So yeah, I'm not buying too much into this hype because I haven't seen the talent throughout his career. It's better than negative news. So I'll give you that, and it's probably likely he does earn the RB2 job there.
Okay. Deneric Prince was the first running back after Pacheco to take first team reps in the Kansas City Chiefs running back room. Also, Kadarius Toney has been being used in the backfield as he's been getting some work there. There was news of that early on. Kansas City's backfield, it's Pacheco, right? He's going to be the lead guy. There's also been some talk with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and stuff. So after Pacheco, we know he's the guy, okay? But after that, is it worth kind of snooping around to find out who's going to be the RB2? And whoever it is, does it matter? Should he be rostered? I mean, is that even worth a handcuff or maybe a long shot Hail Mary?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's great news for Pacheco. I think Pacheco is going to see all of the meaningful touches. He'll be spelled from time to time as every running back is, but I think he'll see all of the important touches. Great news for him. They don't have like a premier pass catching RB on the team, which is a little bit surprising because they've always had that, with Jerick McKinnon. So I want to see who emerges into that role because that is a significant role for third downs, which Pacheco hasn't shown an ability to pass catches yet. So catch passes yet. So if he can show that ability and then he's also on the field for third downs, that would be so fantastic for his fantasy value. I'm not sure if that'll be the case, but yeah, like it's interesting. Like I guess there's a legitimate competition for the RB2 job there between CEH and Deneric Prince. So whoever wins that job, I think is going to be worth having on a roster because Pacheco runs hard and it's very possible that he could sustain an injury, and then whoever steps into that role is going to have immediate fantasy upside, right, with that offense. So I think whoever wins that job will be an important piece at the end of fantasy drafts. But when I hear that news, for me, it's just like I'm very excited about what Pacheco could become if he does handle some third down work. That's huge for his fantasy upside.
I remember when Kadarius Toney was being drafted and looking at his highlight reels and thinking, man, this guy's a running back. He's not a wide receiver. He's a running back. And the fact that KC is now trying to maybe use him that way because he hasn't shown the ability to catch balls in a lot of instances. Does he have any chance, do you think, of being fantasy relevant? Is this a last-ditch effort, or is this just stuff you don't need to, you can just ignore?
I think you could pretty much ignore Kadarius Toney. I think like it's a pretty crowded depth chart now, and I'm not surprised by this news because we know that Andy Reid loves to get balls in the hands of his playmakers. And you know what? Kadarius Toney is a playmaker. He's very, very good with the ball in his hands. He can make guys miss. And we've seen Andy Reid likes to run those reverses and all those kind of trick plays to the receivers. So I could see him being used there like they've used Mecole Hardman in the past, So I think it's going to be interesting for Kansas City's offense. I think they'll be very interesting to watch. But from a fantasy perspective, I think Kadarius Toney's he's got to be left on your waiver wire at this point.
All right. There's been even more hype as of late on Jameson Williams. We talked about him before receiving hype, but it seems to be continuing. You weren't as high on him based on the hype before. This wave has continued. Has this changed your thoughts at all?
I still want to see it. Listen, he has that high draft capital, so I know it's possible he breaks out, but listen, he hasn't shown anything for 2 years. We've seen him stretch the field. You know, that offense is dynamic. So I think he's going to catch a couple long balls, but I want to see more than that. I want to see him used all over the field. Is he capable of running different routes? You know, so they for me right now, he's like the fourth option in that offense at best. You know, we know that Gibbs, Laporta, and
Amon Ra.
Amon-Ra, yeah, we know that they're all elite and they're going to get their targets, but we don't know about Jameson yet. So for me, I just want to see it. I'm not going to believe the hype until I see it on the field.
What do you need to see? Like, do you need to see it in week 1? Do you need to see it in the preseason? And if you do
No,
see it in week,
preseason.
no
I don't
preseason?
expect to see in the. I don't expect to see in the preseason. Like the elite, the starters don't play much in the preseason, so it doesn't mean much for me. I just don't expect him to get a high target volume. So I don't even like it. If he suddenly came out in weeks 1, 2, and 3, you know, got 8 to 10 targets, I would be absolutely surprised and I would have to take notice. But I really do not expect that. I just think, listen, it's a run first team. David Montgomery's going to get his touches too. They want to run the football. They've got great weapons in the passing game, you know, as we just said. So I just don't expect it to happen. I think he's just going to be like a field stretching option, and I don't think he's going to get a high target volume. So I need to see it before I buy in.
So let's say he gets 120 yards and a touchdown in week 1, but on only 3 catches off 4 targets, then
Yeah,
you're still not buying.
no, I'm not
Okay.
buying. I understand for best ball. For best ball, it's a little bit more intriguing because he will give you those long touchdowns. But yeah, for a standard fantasy league where you have to place players into your lineup week to week, he's very scary.
Okay. Nick Chubb starting on the pup list. Obviously, he's coming off a very serious knee injury. How much does this bother you? I mean, we've had such high praise of him from general managers and scouts and stuff, but at the same time, coming off an injury, what do you expect from him going into the season?
I don't want to spend too long here because, listen, that's just fully expected. He's
Yeah.
coming off a brutal injury. We know he's going to go on the pup list. It doesn't matter. He could come off before the season starts. So it doesn't really matter right now that he's on the pup list. I don't expect him to start the season, but no, it doesn't change anything for me on Nick Chubb. I'm still really high on Nick Chubb personally. I think he's an immense talent. I think he's good enough that he will rebound, like similar to how Adrian Peterson did, I think. So I expect that, by the end of this season, we'll see the Nick Chubb of old, and I think going to next year he'll be back to his old self.
Okay. And here's a big one. Okay. Chase Brown continues to take the majority of reps at running back with the first team. How much do you believe this? This is based on a reporter, but it's based on his eyes. I mean, he's taking count
Yeah.
as to who's getting carries and stuff. So how much do you believe this, number one? And number two, if you do believe it a lot, what would you take for Zach Moss right now?
Yeah, so this is a little bit surprising to hear because I don't know why I kind of expected Zach Moss to start the season as the RB1, but when I think about it, I'm not surprised at all. Like it's not shocking to me because I've always thought that Chase Brown is the better player. And then when you look at the contract, I always say follow the money. And when you look at the contract Zach Moss got, it was a backup running back contract, right? Like 2 million a year. So I'm not surprised that Chase Brown is getting the RB1 touches in camp, and I would say now that like Zach Moss's stock is way down for me because I thought Chase Brown would eventually become the starter by like say week 5 or week 6, but now it sounds like it's possible it could happen week 1. So I think Zach Moss's stock is way down in my eyes, and I'm without question taking Chase Brown before him in fantasy drafts this season.
Would you give up a late second to get Chase Brown, and would you take a third to get rid of Moss?
Yeah, I'd absolutely take a third for Moss without question. I'm hesitant to give up seconds at this stage of the season, at the offseason. It's just not how I dynasty. But I think if I'm 100% sure it's a late second, that's a price I'm willing to pay for Chase Brown.
Like if you see yourself as a top 4 team, right? So that
Yeah.
you're going to be, let's say, in the semifinals, and that becomes like 9, 10, 11, 12 pick for Chase Brown in a dynasty league, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a price I'm willing to pay because I do believe in that offense and I do believe in his talent. Moss. So I think for this season he could be the RB1 and he could rise in value considerably by like the midpoint of the season. So yeah, that's a price I'd be willing to pay.
Now, I can't do it for you. The inches we need are everywhere around us. What are you gonna do? Like! Subscribe! Subscribe!
Okay, one other thing I wanted to talk about. I mean, this isn't actually relevant to fantasy leagues right now, but I did want to mention that finally Rashaad Penny has retired. And I had Penny in every single one of my leagues, including one league where I gave up a third-round pick to you, Vaz, to acquire him. And he's one of those guys that was just on my bench for, I feel like, a couple of years, but I couldn't get myself to just drop him because I still had hope. So, Penny, thank you for retiring because first off, it just means I can finally drop you off my team. But Vaz, I wanted to also say to you, okay, you won that trade. I gave up a third to get him off your team when he was starting for Philly. After I got him from you, I thought that was just the greatest trade ever, but I have to concede that you won that trade.
Yeah, I don't think I did win that trade. I think you did get enough production for giving up only a third round pick. You know, you got him for the fantasy playoffs and you started him for your playoff run. So I think that was an absolutely fine trade in your shoes. You know, it's funny you mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that like you feel some sort of relief to get him off your roster because I've had that in the past. You know, predominantly with like rookies that I've stashed on my taxi and I believed in as rookies, but you know, they never pan out. And I'm like, oh, do I drop this guy or not? And I just hang on to them forever. And you know, finally you have to drop those guys, right? Like, for example, like Malik Willis. I finally just dropped him in one of my leagues. I couldn't get myself to drop him because I had used a high draft pick on him. But you know what? It is what it is. He's a bum. So I finally had to just let go.
Any other guys that you've had that experience? You know what? Better yet, let's ask our audience. Who's a guy that you've had on your roster that you just couldn't let go, or it clearly took you too long to drop? Leave that in the comment section below. It'll help you, by the way, to get into one of our leagues to join us in a best ball tournament. Descriptions on that in the descriptions below. So comment on that right there, and we'll know that you are interested in joining our league. Vaz, some news also regarding Quentin Johnston. Speaking of guys that maybe could be on your roster too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a candidate for a guy that's going to be lingering on your roster a couple years too long. Yeah, so listen, it's coming out of camp that he's the wide receiver 4 on the depth chart behind Ladd McConkey and Joshua Palmer, who we fully expected him to be behind, but also behind DJ Chark. So I think you know what, like I know that personally I'd rather have Joshua Palmer in Dynasty than Quentin Johnston. And for me, like if you can still get like an early third round pick for Quentin Johnston, I would go and do that. I think the writing is clearly on the wall. The Chargers don't even view him as a starting receiver. You know, we saw last year he wasn't able to produce with plenty of opportunity, and now he's behind even DJ Chark, who you know hasn't done much throughout his career since his second season. So I think if you could still find somebody who believes in Quentin Johnston, go out and sell now before you know he's about to do nothing in his second year.
Would you take a 4th round pick for QJ?
Oh God, a 4th? I don't think so. But I would take any third.
Yeah. All right. Some news with the Eagles. Running back Will Shipley has been getting first team reps in the red zone. I mean, does that knock down any confidence in Saquon Barkley? For me, it doesn't. But at the same time, does that make Shipley at least the RB2 in Philly and worth rostering as a handcuff?
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't impact Saquon at all. They give him way too much money to he's going to get all of the touches, all of the important touches. He's just too good of a player. I don't even know if it makes him the RB2 there. I think there's a legitimate battle for that RB2 spot. But yeah, this news doesn't concern me whatsoever. I know that's Saquon's backfield 100%.
Okay, a couple of injury news. DeAndre Hopkins out with a knee injury for 4 to 6 weeks. He's an older player, so I mean, how much life does he have left after he comes back from the injury? And you know, you've got to think this is going to knock down his value for both dynasty and redraft significantly.
Yeah, I mean, like he's probably a 1 year play, right? So like if you have if you have him on a dynasty team, it's terrible news because you don't want to start the season injured, at this age because we've seen in the past like the cliff comes very very fast at receiver. So once you hit the age 31, age 32, things could fall off really quickly. Of course, we know that he's a good player, and he's never been one to win with speed. He wins with like his intelligence, his hands, his route running. So I think he could recover. 4 to 6 weeks means maybe he's able to start the beginning of the season, but it is a little bit worrisome. That is a tough timetable.
Would you take a late third for Hopkins?
Late third, I wouldn't. I would hold for that price.
Okay. The other injury that I was referring to is Justin Herbert. It doesn't look like it's going to affect his season, but the word is that he's in a boot and will be for at least a couple of weeks. They say that he should be ready for opening day. So this shouldn't matter. But at the same time, there's been so much negative talk of how much they're going to run the ball and stuff with the Chargers anyways. Is there any significance to this, in your opinion, on him being able to adapt to a new coach, a new system and stuff, or is this just sort of insignificant?
Yeah, just insignificant. I wouldn't worry about this too much. I think, if the timetable is accurate, 2 weeks, it's not a big deal whatsoever. He's going to get plenty of practice time to learn the system or whatnot. Well, I'm sure he's already mastered it at this stage. He's a vet. We don't need to worry about this.
Okay. These were the biggest stories that I could find. Was there any other news that you were looking at over the past few days or week that you wanted to discuss at all?
One that I saw today was just Javonte Williams. So there has been a little bit of negative news surrounding the Broncos backfield. With I heard that maybe Javonte Williams was playing for his was playing for a roster spot, actually, like was a possibility to be cut, in fact. And I couldn't believe that when I read that. And then I read today that Sean Payne came out and said he looks like a completely different player. He's lost 10 pounds. He's lighter. He's quicker. So I think like he's fully recovered from that injury that he sustained 2 years ago. And for me, I know I'm going to own a lot of Javonte Williams. I think he's clearly going to be the lead back there in what could be maybe a tough offense. I'm not sure how good that offense will be, but I think it's very possible that he's handling the majority of the carries, like 20 plus carries a game. So any running back that can handle that much work that you're getting late in fantasy drafts where he's going right now, I think it's an easy target for me.
All right, Javonte Williams as a big sleeper. Check him out. Thanks for checking this out. And remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us next time for another edition of Fantasy Football Freaks.